Hi, I'm Ann from the Lawrence branch of Mercer County Library, and I'm here with my great niece Q, who's going to help me talk about the poems of Jane Kenyon. She was an American poet and translator who shortly before her untimely death in 1995 was named the Poet Laureate of New Hampshire. And the first poem I want to read is the first poem I ever read by Jane Kenyon, and it inspired me to read other poems by her. It's called Otherwise. I got out of bed on two strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birch wood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon, I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day, I know, it will be otherwise. She was born in May 1947 on the outskirts of Ann Arbor, Michigan, in a rural area, and all her life she reflected on pastoral themes and this kind of the spiritual loneliness of being on a farm. And her father was a jazz musician and a music teacher, and her mother had been a nightclub singer. So there was music all throughout her youth and all throughout her home. And she really was very close to her grandmother, who was a very devout person. She moved away from that when she was in high school, I think. And then later in life, she did come back to a strong feeling for religion. And you'll see that reflected in a number of her poems. And Q is going to read one that does show this.
Briefly it enters and briefly speaks. I am the blossom pressed in a book, found again after 200 years. I am the maker, the lover, and the keeper. When the young girl who starves sits down to a table, she will sit beside me. I am food on the prisoner's plate. I am water rushing to the wellhead, filling the pitcher until it spills. I am the patient gardener of the dry and weedy garden. I am the stone step, the latch, and the working hinge. I am the heart contracted by joy, the longest hair, white before the rest. I am there in the basket of fruit presented to the widow. I am the musk rose opening, unattended, the fern on the boggy summit. I am the one whose love overcomes you, already with you when you think to call my name.
She went to the University of Michigan and got a master's degree, bachelor's and a master's. And then she dropped out after a year because she was in a depressed state, and later she was diagnosed as bipolar. And this sort of went on back and forth in her whole life. She came back after a year and became a French major. And then she enrolled in 1969 in a poetry course by the renowned poet Donald Hall, who was later the Poet Laureate. And she also took his creative writing course. And in 1972, when she graduated with the master's, they were married, and they moved to his ancestral farm in New Hampshire, where they both became poets rather than working anywhere. They decided to stay there and have a working life as poets. And one poem she wrote that speaks to her condition is called Having It Out with Melancholy. And the quote before the poem is, "If many remedies are prescribed for an illness, you may be certain that the illness has no cure." From Chekhov, The Cherry Orchard. So we're going to read, it comes in sections, and we're going to each read a section, starting with Q.
1. From the Nursery. When I was born, you waited behind a pile of linen in the nursery, and when we were alone, you lay down on top of me, pressing the bile of desolation into every pore. And from that day on, Everything under the sun and moon made me sad, even the yellow wooden beads that slid and spun along a spindle on my crib. You taught me to exist without gratitude. You ruined my manners toward God. We're here simply to wait for death. The pleasures of earth are overrated. I only appeared to belong to my mother, to live among blocks and cotton undershirts with snaps, among red tin lunchboxes and report cards in ugly brown slipcases. I was already yours, the anti-urge, the mutilator of souls.
2 bottles. Elavil, Ludiumil, Doxepin, Norpermin, Prozac, Lithium, Xanax, Wellbutrin, Parnate, Nardil, Zoloft. The coated ones smell sweet or have no smell. The powdery ones smell like the chemistry lab at school that made me hold my breath.
3. Suggestion from a friend. You wouldn't be so depressed if you really believed in God.
4 often. Often I go to bed as soon as after dinner seems adult. I try to wait for dark, in order to push away from the massive pain in sleep's frail wicker coracle.
5. Once there was light. Once, in my early 30s, I saw that I was a speck of light in the great river of light that undulates through time. I was floating with the whole human family. We were all colors, those who are living now, those who have died, those who are not yet born. For a few moments I floated, completely calm, and I no longer hated having to exist. Like a crow who smells hot blood, you came flying to pull me out of the glowing stream. I'll hold you up. I'll never let my dear ones drown. After that, I wept for days.
6 in and out. The dog searches until he finds me upstairs, lies down with a clatter of elbows, puts his head on my foot. Sometimes the sound of his breathing saves my life. In and out, in and out. Pause, a long sigh.
7. Pardon. A piece of burned meat wears my clothes, speaks in my voice, dispatches obligations haltingly or not at all. It is tired of trying to be stout-hearted, tired beyond measure. We move on to the monoamine oxidase inhibitors. Day and night, I feel as if I had drunk 6 cups of coffee, but the pain stops abruptly. With the wonder and bitterness of someone pardoned for a crime she did not commit, I come back to marriage and friends, to pink-fringed hollyhocks, come back to my desk, books, and chair.
8 credo. Pharmaceutical wonders are at work, but I believe only in this moment of well-being. Unholy Ghost, you are certain to come again. Coarse, mean, you'll put your feet on the coffee table, lean back, and turn me into someone who can't take the trouble to speak. Someone who can't sleep, or who does nothing but sleep, can't read, or call for an appointment for help. There is nothing I can do against your coming. When I awake, I'm still with thee.
9. Wood thrush. High on Nardil and June light, I wake at 4, waiting greedily for the first note of the wood thrush. Easeful air presses through the screen of the wild, complex song of the bird, and I am overcome by ordinary contentment. What hurt me so terribly all my life until this moment? How I love the small, swiftly beating heart of the bird.
So that ends on a not so sad note, which is good. She lived on the farm with Donald Hall for about 20 years, and this was very important to the kind of imagery she put in her poems. And there were periods of happiness and periods of depression for her. And the many friends that they had speak of the times when they went to visit them, and sometimes she would not be able to say much, but other times she joined in with them, and they had very good memories of her. But here's another poem that she wrote during this time, called Happiness.
Happiness. There's just no accounting for happiness, or the way it turns up like a prodigal who comes back to the dust at your feet having squandered a fortune far away. And how can you not forgive? You make a feast in honor of what was lost, and take from its place the finest garment, which you saved for an occasion you could not imagine, and you weep night and day to know that you were not abandoned, that happiness saved its most extreme form for you alone. No, happiness is the uncle you never knew about, who flies a single-engine plane onto the grassy landing strip, hitchhikes into town, and inquires at every door until he finds you asleep mid-afternoon, as you so often are during the unmerciful hours of your despair. It comes to the monk in his cell. It comes to the woman sweeping the street with a birch broom, to the child whose mother has passed out from drink. It comes to the lover, to the dog chewing a sock, to the pusher, to the basket maker, and to the clerk stacking cans of carrots in the night. It even comes to the boulder, in the perpetual shade of pine barrens, to rain falling on the open sea, to the wineglass weary of holding wine.
The last poem that I'm going to read was written for her pastor, a friend who was dying of cancer. And this one is full of tenderness and has a spiritual quality that many people have recognized. And it's probably maybe her most well-known poem. It's called Let Evening Come. Let the light of late afternoon shine through the chinks in the barn, moving up the bales as the sun moves down. Let the cricket take up chafing as a woman takes up her needles and her yarn. Let evening come. Let dew collect on the hoe abandoned in long grass. Let the stars appear and the moon disclose her silver horn. Let the fox go back to its sandy den. Let the wind die down. Let the shed go black inside. Let evening come. To the bottle in the ditch, to the scoop in the oats, to air in the lung, let evening come. Let it come as it will, and don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless, so let evening come. Her husband got colon cancer at this time, and he recovered, but then she got sick, and she died at the age of 47, an untimely death, and she was diagnosed with leukemia. And she was known for simple, spare, and evocative poems. And I think she published she published 4 books in her lifetime. And she is someone who deserves rereading. So you can find her books in the library, and also the books of her husband, Donald Hall, who wrote a number of poems about their life together and about her. So thanks for listening, and we've had 1 meeting of the Poetry Circle so far this year, and we're not sure when we're going to start up again, but I hope you'll remember to look for that and come either on Zoom or in the library when we get back to library programs.